the CCRB is just not working, right? It was underfunded from its inception. It's been largely ineffective. Its mandate is way too broad, dealing with a range of serious misconduct, use of force, et cetera, all the way to what I will call fairly trivial matters. The way that it's set up is really just unfair to cops. There are tons and tons of unsubstantiated complaints that remain publicly available and essentially on the officer's record for his or her entire career. And we wouldn't accept that if it was a regular citizen. If someone, if someone was accused of a crime and was acquitted, that would be expunged from their record. And we really shouldn't be treating cops any differently. So I've already announced the creation of, in my administration, of what's called the Citywide Department of Public Integrity. And today's announcement is that I want to fold the CCRB's functions into it with respect to serious misconduct. And then with other forms of alleged misconduct, I want that to be handled by the NYPD in an administrative process where police officers have a right to confidentiality, and there is a way to address behaviors that are correctable without tarnishing police unduly. I've spoken to a lot of supervisors and so part of what I want the CDPI to do is to be able to work with cops to say, okay, we're going to bring charges against you, but if you agree to the following steps and the following remediation and the following re-education, et cetera, and you prove that you can get past this, then we won't bring a case against you. And those kinds of deferred prosecution agreements or non-prosecution agreements are a regular feature of what we have in our tool chest for anyone that is accused of wrongdoing, misconduct, or breaking the law. So why can't we use those with police who maybe it's their first, maybe it's their second complaint, maybe they're young in their career, maybe they've had some bad examples, but to give them an accountable way to try to rebuild themselves and to get better and to learn from the experience in a way that preserves their dignity and their careers, while at the same time having a tool in your toolbox that if they are under a deferred prosecution agreement or a non-prosecution agreement, and there's another transgression and they break the law, then they get prosecuted for the original offense. So that's part of the criminal justice system. When I was a prosecutor for 9 years, I used those tools all the time because I had a full toolbox. CCRB does not have a full toolbox, and it's not there to help reform the police department and to help individual officers get better. And so my administration is going to look at this in a holistic way so that we have a system that's better for citizens and a system that's better for the cops.
Yeah, we obviously saw a lot of corruption, and that I don't believe was properly weeded out of the NYPD. I don't think Eric believes that either. A ton of corruption that happened under the Adams administration that's still occurring, unfortunately. I think something that people are missing is you already announced your Bureau of Public Integrity. And basically what you're saying, which isn't small, I mean, it's bigger than the announcement of that you would be taking over the duties and responsibilities of the CCRB. But you're also saying that that agency will also take over the duties and responsibilities of the NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau, as well as all of the other internal watchdogs or internal affairs for every other single agency. Could you just explain to the audience the rationale behind why you see a need to remove the investigation of corruption from the agency itself?
Yeah, of course. So let me just talk about self-policing. All right. Let's just say that I've got a law firm and we find out that someone has done something wrong. Right. Self-policing is usually not a great way to structure when you really have serious misconduct. And you have a person that, may have standing, may have friends, may have connections within the department, and yet the department itself is controlling the investigation. That doesn't do a lot for the integrity of the investigation, and it also doesn't do a lot for public confidence in our ability to self-police. People are always skeptical and cynical and think, oh, well, they're just sweeping it under the carpet. And that experience is fair because a lot of times these self-policing mechanisms do sweep things under the carpet, particularly for people that are well connected within their agency. So this is why originally, years and years ago, there was something called an inspector general for every agency. And it used to be that the inspector generals sat within a department, and now they've been removed, at least some of them have been removed from the departments, and so they sit outside. The reason that they were moved from inside the agencies to outside the agencies was to give them independence. But the problem is that those individual inspector generals now don't have power and budgets to actually conduct the investigations. And so the problem is that you have a citywide corruption problem, and you need an agency with citywide perspective to be able to use its resources and tools effectively to get at the worst conduct. Whether or not today the worst conduct is occurring in corrections, in NYPD, in the Department of Finance, or in all three, right? So this agency is going to give the public confidence that there's independence. Why? These inspector generals, they got a boss, right? And at the end of the day, the boss is the mayor. And that's the same problem with this agency called the Department of Investigation that's supposed to be the watchdog for city agencies. Guess who appoints the commissioner of the Department of Investigation? The mayor. We saw under the de Blasio administration that de Blasio tried to quash some of the investigations by the commissioner for the Department of Investigations because it was unflattering to him. That's a bad way to set up a system. What really needs to happen is we've got this public advocate that does very little, and that's the person that's going to be in line to be the mayor if the mayor got hit by a bus. That's crazy. So how about having a commissioner of the citywide Department of Public Integrity that is totally independent of City Hall, that is actually professional with serious anti-corruption experience, and that person will be the person to take over if the mayor gets hit by a bus. And in the meantime, he or she will be responsible for being the watchdog, independent of City Hall, for all of the city agencies. We have a serious corruption problem in New York City. It's been a problem that has been plaguing us for 50 years, and we've never taken it seriously. It is time that we finally take corruption seriously and set up an agency that's got the power, the authority, the budget, and the expertise to get the bad apples out of City Hall, whether it's the mayor or anyone else. And think about this. Tell me one other candidate that is willing to say, I'm prepared to advocate for an agency that can remove me if I'm corrupt, right? That's the kind of power that I think the citywide Department of Public Integrity needs to have. And that's what every single candidate who claims that they're invested in getting corruption out of City Hall, every single one of them should sign on to this plan. Every single one of them should say, I am prepared to create an agency that has the power to remove me if it turns out that I've done something corrupt. That's when you know you have real integrity in City Hall.
Well, I think you laid out a major concern that cops have, particularly myself. And the concern was always, how do we ensure that the oversight is fair and balanced while holding officers accountable, but also holding the CCRB panel and the CCRB investigators accountable as well? And I think you just laid it out here, which is perfect, because that's what's important, is balance. And I think that's where we see the scales tipped in New York City, and which is why it leaves too much room for corruption. So I can't appreciate that more even further. Again, we talk about leaps and bounds. I think there's leaps and bounds in your policy. If you could also explain your policy, and I've read it, and I think this is where the police officers need to hear this. We have a lot of active and retired friends and family to this podcast to understand, once the CDPI is created, how everyone is going to get a clean slate. And if you could go into that, I think that's what's interesting in your policy.
Yeah, thanks. And the policy's on my website. It's jim4nyc.com. There's a pop-up on the website, so you don't even have to look for the policy. The pop-up will come right up and say, read the policy. It's not that long. It's about 6 pages, and it's like double-spaced, so it'll take you about 15 minutes to read at the most. So I really encourage people to go on the website and read it. But I am going to institute this to be fair to cops, and it's ridiculous to me that unsubstantiated complaints stay on an officer's record even after they've retired, and the same thing's true with substantiated complaints. So when the CDPI is created and it replaces CCRB, unsubstantiated complaints will be taken down, period. Now, they're still publicly available because people have downloaded the CCRB database. So there's nothing I can do about that. But with respect to substantiated complaints, they'll remain available for about a year. And then with respect to forward-looking cases, there'll be real time limits, so that if someone has been charged, there's obviously no time limit on when that information is publicly available. There'll be a court, there'll be a transcript. People can come to the proceedings. People can order the transcript. So those cases will never go away unless an officer is acquitted, in which case afterwards the case will be sealed. With respect to complaints, it's not going to be the same sort of system. And so unsubstantiated complaints are not going to be publicly available on a go-forward basis. So if the CCRB says, listen, this is either a case that is not worth bringing, just like any other prosecutor, CDPI will just close the file. If CDPI finds that there's a case that's a worthwhile case and that there's sufficient evidence, but it doesn't want to necessarily bring the case to court, then they have the option for a non-prosecution agreement or a deferred prosecution agreement. And those are just contracts between the agency and the officer saying, okay, either we will not prosecute you or we will defer any prosecution decision of you, depending on the following things. And for each officer, there'll be a specific set of things that the officer will need to do to reform him or herself. And if they successfully get through the deferred prosecution agreement or the non-prosecution agreement, then the case will be sealed and their career will continue. Obviously, there'll be an internal record of this within CDPI that will be available if it's necessary because of later misconduct by that officer. So that's basically the way it's set up. Obviously, this is a policy that I put out for the purposes of the campaign. So I'm going to be working with my policy council over the course of the next several months to unpack it a little bit more so that people can, because undoubtedly, as you did, Eric, when we talked, you raised some really good points that led me to think about other ways to enhance the policy in certain respects. So thank you for that. I want that to happen with respect to officers all over the city. I want to hear people's experiences. So for those people that are listening, if you read the policy and you realize that there are things that you can make suggestions on, I'm not going to say I'm going to agree with you, but I definitely want to hear you. So please email me at my campaign email address, which is jim@jim4nyc.com. That's 4 as in FOR, not the number 4. And I'd be happy to get people's input. Thankfully, not just you guys, but I've got people with real policing experience that have helped me work through this policy. Thankfully, the campaign's been growing and I'm getting more support from police officers all over the city as I stand up for the police at a time when we need them more. They also need us more. So this is very much a campaign of purpose to try, again, to bring everyone together around a sensible set of policies.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I read it. I thought it was clear. I thought it was common sense. So we got about 14,000 people on here. Go over to www.jim4nyc.com. Read through his policy. Any suggestions, complaints? Feel free. You could send them to us as well. We'll forward them over. I read through it. I think it's something that needs to be done. I do. But that's the question, and we're getting that a lot in the chat as well.
You've just watched a clip from our live episode. Click the description to watch the full episode. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this.